it go, yeah. Let it go. Yeah, me let it go. Master Jesus, let it go. Yeah, me let it go. Go, 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 go. Oh, let it go. I'm tired, let it go. Give your heart to Jesus. Let him take control. Just sit and worship. I know it hurts you, and I know it's painful. No way to wait, so you have to let it go. Your best friend is not your secret enemies. Let it go. Your wife is getting married to another man. Your husband are falling in love with another woman. Don't let it bother you. I've said let it go. If someone overlook you because you live in zero, if they insult you because you don't have nobody, if you say you will continue to be a zogo, if you say you will continue to be a prostitute, if you say you will continue to be a beggar, you will not marry, you will not bear your own children. If you say your knee is borrow, Sunday go to meeting, mommy can say no, Johnny ginger. Just let it go. Jesus will change your story. Let it go. 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 Lord, help me let it go. Help me let it go, man.
Yeah. Mighty blow.
All right, folks, good evening and welcome to tonight's show. I'm Alfonso here, so on the Lpr-Tv radio.
Nobody do it like you do it. You a true God. Yes, always hear me when I say my prayer with you.
We want to welcome you to this show here. Thank you for sharing this day, Tuesday. Welcome. This is the Liberia Public Radio and Lpr-Tv. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
The best of money, rest, you gotta pray more. The God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the God of mighty blow. But there is power in your blood, and what I'm giving praises. Yes. I gotta dance that David dance. They think I'm getting crazy. But love is how you make it, brother. May not be his.
Good evening, folks. Welcome. I'm Alfonso and Sort of the Liberia Public Radio and Lpr-Tv. We want to welcome our viewers and listeners across the globe. Thank you for sharing this Tuesday evening with us. Well, today we want to take you inside someone who worked within the proximity of a certain president, the former presidential secretary, Republic of Liberia, is here. The conversation is on the overstate of the president of the Republic of Liberia, currently in Qatar. A lot of conversation is going on. No press briefings. A lot is not being heard. But what it takes to manage the office of the president of the Republic of Liberia or any sitting president was someone who once served in this position as one of the handlers of the former president, as the 24th president of the Republic of Liberia, Madam Helen Johnson Sirleaf. Mr. Pierre is here this evening to get a sense the difficulties, the challenges, what we do not know outside of the presidential war. Do they argue with the president? What is the specific instruction given to them? What we need to know that we yet do not know. Well, he's here this evening, and we're going to be having this conversation. He's standing by. Let me bring him here quickly here. By the way, this is Madam Helen Johnson Sirleaf. Is the 24th president of the Republic of Liberia. Well, he worked closely with President Helen Johnson Sirleaf. 4, 5, 6 years approximately. We'll hear from him directly. Is it as easy as we ordinary person think outside of the bare will Well, I have no idea how it looks like. But let's have a conversation here. We want to be getting a clear picture, a little look. By the way, he's not in office, so he can release whatever information he's at liberty to do that here. Part of that is to get a sense and begin to have the conversation. Those who seek in higher office of the land, people who are their handlers, what we need to know about them. Do they, in the honest fashion, tell them the truth? Or everything is just about yes, it's in our own traditional way or context? Well, Gerald Appiah is a former presidential secretary, Republic of Liberia, told Madam Helen Johnson Sirleaf. He's standing by. Let me bring him here. The time is already eating away here. Let's have a conversation. Okay. My dear brother and friend, I thank you so much for joining us here. Let me see here. Look at we in too much of right here this evening here. I'm not a barrel guy. Let's see. Let mix it up. Okay, I think much better here. Okay. Okay, Mr. Piata, good evening and welcome.
Yes, thank you, sir. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm glad that you asked me to make my own little contribution to what you do here on your program. So it's an honor to be here.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And before you go further, if you hearing echo-like situation in the background, please understand this is America, especially those who don't live in complete houses and you are in an apartment structure. So it's actually the heater that is on, and it's going to be terrible for the kids if we were to cut it out because they need to be warm. So please, I'm urging you and your audience to bear with the little echo-like sound you'll be hearing. It's coming from the heater.
Okay, no, that's understandable. Our kids in here, sometimes do the next thing they're going to start screaming and they're going to be abused and all of that. We don't want that. We will deal with it as it is. Okay, thank you. Well, there's a tradition here, Mr. Piat. I will not ask you personally for intro, but there are people who pass through on a daily basis, new people, and maybe they have been hearing this name here. It would just be unfair to not give you the opportunity to have the few seconds of mini intro for us to have this conversation.
Well, the name is Jerolimek Matthew Pia, as you see on your screen. I'm a Liberian citizen. I hail from particularly Grand Bassa County in Liberia. I'm a family man, married with 5 kids. I schooled, bachelor degree from the University of Liberia, master degree from the University of Liberia, a master in public administration from the Harvard Kennedy School at Harvard University, the former classroom teacher in the Catholic school system, former assistant minister of gender, former deputy minister for information, former acting minister of information, former presidential press secretary. I'm a Catholic by faith. Maybe just that.
Okay, so thank you so much for all of the work you did for our country. Whether we agree or disagree, that's in numbers. It takes a sacrifice, an ultimate sacrifice to lead your people and to do what is right. Thank you so much for the services you render for our country, and even you continue to do having this sort of conversation. That's another unique way of giving back to your country. All right. Let's get this conversation going here. It is difficult if you are not in the system. If you are not in the system, sometimes I convict people without knowing what is happening here. And I know maybe the question might sound ridiculous here, but I just want it in the simplest context. Presidential press secretary. When we hear presidential press secretary, what is the simplest definition that the ordinary person there tools understand? I know you manage the affair, the rendezvous, the correspondence, and all of that. But what is your own understanding of a presidential press secretary?
Well, everything that is associated with the office of president everything that the president does will not be known to the larger society except somebody make them to know. So the press secretary is a communicator, is the media person who tells the story of the presidency, who keeps the public informed about everything happening with the president. He's the man who, when there are stuff that people want to know about, particularly the fourth estate, that media, they cannot call the president direct to say, we heard this about the mansion. What is the story behind this? It's one person they call, the press secretary. He will give them information. For example, President Weah is out of the country. It is the press secretary who's supposed to make the public to know where the president was going, who's going with him, what is he going for, how long he will be there, when exactly does he come back to the country, and at the same time, why he's there on a day-to-day basis, depending on what he's doing there. It is that person who helps the public to know exactly what is happening there. All the big media institutions you see globally, whether it's CNN, whether it's BBC, whether it's Al Jazeera, if they wanted to have a media engagement with the office of the president, they contact the press secretary, they work it out with the press secretary, and the president just gets into the picture as an end product. So the press secretary is the public face of the president. And I like how a few ministers used to refer to me. They normally used to say the voice of the president. Meaning when you speak, the president speaks. So you speak as Mr. Pia, but that which you speak represents the president, and therefore you are the voice of the president. It is not the responsibility of the press secretary to communicate his opinion, to communicate his thought. Everything he communicates must be a representation of the executive mansion or the office of the president. And that if you were to think out of imagination that you can, as the press secretary to the president, say something or say anything, if the president did not authorize you to say that and he or she is in disagreement, you could be in some trouble with your job because it's not about you. It's about the president. So even if you figure out that something is happening, the public needs to know something, before you say what the public needs to know, you clear out the president, you have a conversation with the president on that before you get out. So I just stretch you a little bit so that people can understand, but like I said, just as few of the cabinet ministers used to call me, the press secretary is the voice of the president who makes the public to know all that is happening at the presidency.
Okay, I think that's the most simplest definition. That was so much in detail. Let me welcome the legendary Giant the Gallet back on stage. Good to see you back, my dear brother. Okay, I think it is important that we have this conversation. It is very, very much essential because more or less the press secretary is served as a buffer zone between the office of the president and the ordinary people, the media, and like you said, even international and the public as well. So let me ask this question here, Mr. Pia. Is there a specific instruction or is the president accept advice, opinions, suggestion from the press secretary, or is everything strictly instruction? Is there a layout work upon taking office? For example, if you are appointed, look, this is where you're supposed to go. you are not going to go left, go right, but this is exactly the president's agenda and it has to be executed. I know it might sound a little bit ridiculous here, but trying to get somewhere. Let's talk about your own personal experience. When you were appointed with all of these credentials, being the media person, how was it like? Any roadmap was given to you? This is how we want you to go?
Well, no, nobody got to give you a roadmap. What is key from the very beginning is you have to understand the core function of the office that you've been named to. Of course, there are many ways that people handle communication. So the president is not going to tell you handle communication this way, handle communication that way. As the handler of the office, and as somebody who's supposed to be schooled in what you've been asked to do, you know what is required to have you do your work efficiently. So when you sit through, when they name you to such a position and you sit through and you sit down in your corner and figure out what kind of oppressed office do I want to have? What do I want to do? Maybe if you didn't have a website, say, okay, I want to run an effective website. It requires resources, of course. Now we're in the new media era. So you say we want to have a huge presence on the new media, which is social media, whether it's Instagram, it's YouTube, it's Facebook, it's Twitter. You got to figure what are those medium of communication that you want to use in your work. Maybe you also want to do something like public engagement to say, okay, look, you put a press release in newspaper, people publish it. Not all the people read. So I want to have a program, let's say, called media outreach. And maybe on a media outreach, I could say, okay, every week I'll visit one social center, popularly known in Liberia as maybe Atai Center. Mm-hmm. And then we go there, we talk about the presidency, people have the opportunity to interact with you directly, ask you some questions. So it's a wide range of why you who run the office thing will work. And what the president wants to see is that whatever you do, whatever activities that you formulate must promote and be tied to the key function of the office you occupy, press secretary. Now, it's not just about that. There are many offices in the presidency. Each of the people there, of course, they know what their core function should be, but the activities that enhance the attainment of your core functions are left for you. Nothing written there in black and white and say, this is how you should do it. What is there in black and white is the fact that there's an office responsible to communicate everything happening in the presidency or at the presidency to the general public. How are you supposed to attain that is left for you. Maybe you want to say, we have from the executive mansion, which would be maybe a 30-minute or 1 hour radio and TV program every week. So you put what is required to be done to prepare that package. Like I remember those days, they used to have Mika half hour. Mika half hour was the Ministry of Information own way of, because they speak for overall for the government. The press secretary, you focus purposely on the government. The Ministry of Information speaks for the entire government. So Mika half hour was one of their own ways of bringing to the attention of the public things that were happening in the government. That was their activity that they developed, but nothing was written in black and white to say, when you come to Ministry of Information, go to Mika half hour, or go do Lina Panorama, or go do this. So these are just thought processes of people which they think can enhance their work. So to answer your question quickly, no, there is no black and white and you are not constricted. Your core function is there. How you execute it, what are the activities and programs that you put together to execute it is for you. Again, let me be quick to say, it depends on the individual occupying the executive mansion. So if the individual occupying the executive mansion got respect for each of the offices that are within the presidency,
I hate to interrupt, Mr. Pia. When you say individual occupying the executive mansion, are we referring to the president?
The president. So you have President Taylor, and sometimes you have President Doe, you have President Sirleaf, now you have President Weah. So their approaches, or the way they see the media, or not just the media, but the way they interact with people in their staffing could be different. So I give you an example. So for President Sirleaf, when day breaks and she comes to the executive mansion, she got two routine first activities. Two, it's a must that those two activities are undertaken before any other thing, except in the case of emergency. Activity number one, President enters her office. She has a briefing section with the National Security Advisor. The intent is, in her mind, when you leave your house in the morning as president and you come to work, you do not have an understanding of what the security situation in the country is as of the period you go sit behind your desk in the office. The one who can give you a picture of what you're inheriting for that day in terms of how secure the country is, what kind of security situations that you're going to face for that work day, all the different security related stuff. You have that conversation with the National Security Advisor. Normally 1 hour is allotted for that. Depending on what you have to do, it could be shorter, it could be longer. Immediately the security advisor comes out of the president's office, the press secretary to the president goes in for equal and similar amount of time. And like the security advisor giving a chronicle of the security situation the president is inheriting as of the beginning of the day's work, the press secretary will be briefing her about all the critical media situation that are on hand as she resumes her daily activity. So it takes a lot, because before you go in there to see the president, it means that as a press secretary, you have seen all the newspapers that operate in the country. You have seen copy of all of them that morning. Now the president has a lot of work to do. So it doesn't make sense that you take, especially with the media pluralism we have, that you would take 30 newspapers and carry to the president and say, these are the newspapers for today. And she got to leave all her work she's doing and she's flipping one newspaper page at the other. So no. So before we go in for that period of conversation that I'm talking about, we have not just seen all the newspaper, we have developed a summary of all this. So I didn't have to do it as press secretary. It was somebody's own job. So that when it comes to work so in the morning, by 7 o'clock.
You dedicate that responsibility though.
Of course, I dedicated, but that's part of a few reasons for which the person is employed. The person got a number of functions, but having all the newspapers together, summarizing all the key stories in it is part of that person's responsibility. So I got to make sure the person is doing it, because before I go to the office of the president, I have 2 copies of that summary in my hand, one for me, one for the president. So I put one in her hand, and you give her a chance, you give her a break. She will run over it. Everything in it may not be newsworthy or may not be of concern to the presidency. But you know the way the media works in Liberia, there'll be a lot of stories there, of course, that the president will take interest in. Maybe somebody is making some huge allegation against the government, and it's in the paper for that day. Maybe somebody is saying something about the presidency itself. So as she looks in there, those important issues that require some redress are the one with dialogue on.
Okay, let me put you there a little bit more, Mr. P. Let's have a conversation. You mentioned something very crucial, like somebody saying something, conspiracy, innuendos, all sort of force who is out there now with the proliferations of the media, like you just alluded. Say, Mr. P. Now the presidential press secretary en route to the office, and something of a pop out. Do you have to get the consultations of the president before you speak at that point in time? Even though you are not going to the office, but you saw something that is unusual, is not right. And you, as the presidential press secretary, more or less you speak for the government. Like here in the USA, you have press secretary is their own information minister. Whatever comes from the mouth of the press secretary is the president, is the nation speaking. Do you have to get consultation from the president before you speak on certain issue? Are there some sort of a bottleneck to that?
Well, I wouldn't want to call it bottleneck but you got to consult. So, for example, I'm going to the president's office and somebody writes or says something that you, maybe you are the Minister of Information, and you've been accused that you maybe ate some kind of money, or that you were into some social holy battle with somebody in some fire, and they say you brutalized a woman. So, or somebody who's working in the presidency, there's an accusation against the person. You are not under any obligation to just speak, because your work has to be fact-based if you want to have the respect of the public and if you want to run the office with integrity. So in other words, I'm saying you don't just jump or go to defend anything until you get clarity. So for example, I will still have to go to the president. Okay, Madam President, maybe we're looking in the paper and one of the accusations that is there is some corruption saga at Ministry of Post and Telecommunication. So if she looks at the summary and it looks like something of serious interest while I'm sitting there, she will call the Minister of Post and Telecommunication. Why would that's part of the briefing? That's why sometimes you go, they gotta be an hour or more, sometimes less. So when you call the Minister of Post and Telecommunication and say, have you seen the newspaper this morning? Maybe the minister will say, oh, I have not even reached the office, because she used to go to office very soon. So maybe the minister will say, I have not reached the office. All right, there's a story in newspaper XYZ about your ministry and you. I want you to read it first, and then you get back to me as to what is your position about what I see in that paper. So I'm not going to say anything about that story. That minister will see the paper. You eventually call the president by. You have a conversation. The president will have an understanding of what is unfolding, different from perhaps what is in the paper. And then she will call him back and say, okay, when the minister must have had a conversation, this is what he said. But that's his word, and that's the minister's word. So the media, in the way the president saw it, the media is security. So he said, okay, you got your ear on the ground with all the different media institutions. Do some run around and see whether you can do whether you can get additional information that may either support the minister's clarification or what is in the paper. So we have to find all the facts before we speak to the issue. So if for example, after we do all of that, you say, okay, maybe journalists come and ask you, is the president aware that XYZ is happening in Ministry X? Then based on the consultation between you and I can come and say, oh yes, the president has seen and heard about the reports of XYZ happening at the Ministry of Information or Ministry of this. The office of the president is looking into that. We get to the crust of what we've seen in the papers. And after having done that, we'll get back to the public.
So,
all right. So, and it may not necessarily all of the time be the obligation of the president. Sometimes when we brainstorm and we discuss with the president, say, okay, Mr. Minister, you said this story is not true, you have the facts, but it has a bearing on the entire government, it has a bearing on the presidency. So you got to speak to the public, you got to speak to the media and address this issue. All right. So, but meanwhile, it doesn't stop us from doing our own background, because everybody will defend themselves. Even if I did something wrong and somebody brings that attack on, maybe my initial step will be self-defense.
Okay.
So self-defense doesn't mean that the person lying on me. So there will always be another layer of follow-up and investigation beyond what the minister or the managing director or somebody would just say.
Let me hold you right there. This seems to be a real work that the ordinary person doesn't know out there of the responsibility of the presidential press secretary, because he drives the agenda, not just only the president, literally the government of the sitting government. So is that a real time happening within the presidential inner war you're telling us here? So it means the sitting president is also engaging, and not just people telling you something, but hey, got to get a second side of the story, do her own due diligence as well. Is that a real time happening within the presidential war? Are we hearing today?
Depending on the person, I mean, I would want to say this. It depends on the person.
Yeah, okay, let's put it in your case. You no longer, and that is quite true. I agree with you on that.
President Sirleaf is a person of detail. And the truth, if I should confess to you, it's difficult working with President Sirleaf because of what she demands of people who work directly with her. So prior to going to the executive mansion, like I said in my intro, I was an assistant minister at the Ministry of Gender. And then I was deputy minister for information. The most difficult period of my working in government was the time I spent at the executive mansion, because of the demand on all of the offices. And because the press secretary office is like a fixing office. It's supposed to be a damage control office. You have much burden, much tension, much stress on you sitting in the presidency than the Minister of Information, who sits all the way there at his ministry, because you're right there. So for example, I gave you an instance. I said every morning the president will have this briefing with the press secretary and the national security advisor separately. But after I leave that office, after that briefing, sometimes I have to enter the president's office, sometimes up to 10 times for the remainder of the day, sometimes up to 15 times for the remainder of the day before we leave office. Because the fact that you have gone for the briefing does not end the interaction of the president with you. As soon as you see something popping, or because people call the president for other direction, or somebody who got direct line, or call her and bring something to her attention that have media implication that will require the attention of the press secretary, she'll call you. And you go back out there, you'll talk about, hey, you'll brainstorm on what needs to be done. And like I said, when I kept saying depend on the president does not impose responses to issue. So you sit with her and she will say, okay, like your area, what do you think we should do? And you will say what you think should be done. Of course, you're not a media person, but she could think otherwise. And she say, hey, suppose we do it this way. And sometimes they do it this way. She talked about it makes sense. And after your dialogue, when you say, okay, I think you got it right. But there are also times that what she will be proposing, I think we can do it away, may not be correct. And you have to be firm and say, no, Mr. President, no, Madam President. Here's the danger when we do it this way you're talking about. Here's what some of the feedback will be. Here's what some of the backlash should be. This is the reason why we should do it this way. And over 90% of the time, she will respect your professional opinion because that is your office. That's why she put you there. For the president alone could be everything. If she could be Minister of Gender, Minister of Finance, Minister of Transport, Minister of everything, she would not appoint people there. But because she can be everything, so she appoints people in all the different positions.
Okay.
An understanding of those offices and those positions. And therefore, even in your interaction with her, where she will have her own view, your professional judgment as the one who manages the office that should handle what you're brainstorming on is always respected. And one is convincing, and you can convince her that that position which you believe should be the position is okay, is solid, and is better than other options that may come, she will give you the benefit of the doubt.
Okay.
And so I come in before I end, that's also risky because she will give you the benefit of the doubt because of your area. But if your benefit of the data is given to you ends up in a catastrophe, you're in trouble. Because that means you didn't understand your own work and you deceived everybody into following you on something that led to a bigger embarrassment than mitigating it.
Yeah. I think it's good we're having this conversation here. It's good to know the inner side without not going into classified security information. Talking about the president respecting your profession. Do you remember at any point in time, Mr. Pierre, where your suggestions, your professional suggestion put forward was override, or the president to say, okay, yeah, this is what I think I need to do? Was that a present with your 5-6 years of working?
I don't want to say override or overrating, but what I want to say, there were instances where she was capable of convincing me that the option she had was a better option. And as a professional person, if you and someone brainstorm on a situation and the person convinces you that which they are, because you don't know all. Yeah, it's your era. You are the guy in charge of media, but mind you, politicians are jack of all trades. To be a good politician, you also have to be managing yourself media-wise. So you have some insight. So there'll be some times, and because and it brings me to a point where I say that is the reason why I tell anybody, press secretary, minister of information, these jobs are communication related, but they are not necessarily always suitable for just a journalist because they are political positions. So the people who will perform very well in those positions got to be people who have media inclination, yes, but who got to be politically grounded because your environment is political. So if a journalist is reporting, say, they found somebody haircut and laying out in your yard, once that generally got the fact that the person was beheaded and the body laying out in your yard, that's journalism. He will report the story as it is. That is not governmental communication. It's different. Journalists, for example, they were fighting war, like what you have when we're fighting the war. And people used to blame Emmanuel Buya and others. And it is known almost to the public that you were in Douala and the rebels are ready to claim. A journalist would take his newspaper and write a story because it's the fact. You want to report the fact. You're right. That the rebels have advanced all the way and they are ready to claim. If you ask the government communicator, he's not going to tell you that rebels are at play. The reason is very simple. You create a state of panic. People panic because you confront me as a government who's supposed to be containing these rebels. You say, oh, well, in other words, you're saying, but if we're overpower the right to claim. So the press secretary or minister of information basically will say, oh yes, fighting is taking place. Perhaps the rebels have intensified their assault. Government forces are friendly and engaged in this. We can assure the public that the surge in the fight of recent will be contained. The government is still very much in charge of the situation. Then people have a sense of comfort. They have a sense of safety. And that's the reason why sometimes when something happens and you speak into it, it's not just a journalistic thing and just say, this is why it is. It has to be embedded, inclined with political language and political thinking, because everything around governance is about politics. So even communication has to be, to a greater extent, media, yes, but with elements that consider the politics of the day. Other than that, from day one, you're already filling in that office as press secretary or as minister of information. So then I think many presidents understand this. That's why they don't go for conventional media people in those positions. they will appreciate the fact that you have some media background. But what would please them more is that you got to be politically knowledgeable, very grounded politically. Then you do better because the system you operate in, the environment you're operating in, is a political environment. And I'm not saying this to say that you should lie. No. I'm only saying you cannot be as raw as you're supposed to be, because if you're noted for lying as a
are you saying like a press secretary, you are like a fixer?
But what you are. So when something is happening and the government media or in the paper or in the public, everybody attacking, you're not a guy who causing the problem. It is you who they want to fix it. And when you're not fixing that, that's the bad part about it. When you're not fixing it as they expect, they get mad with you. Mad with you for a problem that you did not create. So I used to tell sometimes when we having terribly bad PR all over the place, I used to always tell people, I used to tell the president, I say, our response to bad PR is not just debunking, rebutting, and coming out. Sometimes it has to be the change of attitude and the change of the way we do things. If we're having corruption story every day, you think the way to lay that to rest is to just be responding to it and debunking? The way to handle it also should include that the guys who are always wanting to put their hands in the cookie jar and creating stories for the media should stop doing it. Because if they're not doing it, the media will not manufacture the story to say this is what is happening. So developmental wise, for example, somebody feel the government is not doing much, or the president just saying that they are failing. So now it does not just take you responding. So now you just sit down and play and say, okay, we have all the critical developmental intervention. Today we're taking the media on a tour. You invite the media, you bowl all the cards. You're taking the role. You go to the other project, you go to the other project, you go to the other project. By the time you end the day with the visitation, you have responded to those information and nothing has been done. Because you took them there and they see everything that is happening. So it's not just word. You're responding and say, oh, don't mind who's it, nothing happening, or a lot is happening, blah, 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 blah. It's just talking. It's good at times you do it. Sometimes you complement that with just say, okay, we'll not respond to say anything, we'll not be debunking, we'll not be fighting back. Let's call the media, let's take a tour for this day. At the end of the day, the media comes back and says, wow, we didn't know that all these things were happening. You have responded to that issue. The facts have been provided. Then they know that those who said nothing happening were lying, or they were doing it for politics.
This is quite interesting. Considering all that is unfolding, what we're seeing, and with your expertise, being there, working within the proximity of the president, here we are today, this volatile and heavily loaded presidential race we're in. And most of the time I say, I am concerned the handlers, they themselves, I'm not sure how honest they can be, and we want to play into that at what point in time. Do you think, considering all that we are having today, Joseph Boyka, the Cuban president, he's already there, the Alexander Cummings, and all other folks that are going to come, it's a time that we begin to see the faces of these people who could potentially be the face of the government or presidential spokesperson. I'm saying this to say, for example, and I know people will say, well, yes, we have to make that sort of comparison here. We began to get a sense from the Biden campaign when James Psaki was more or less the face of the activities of the party, the probability of her becoming the presidential spokesperson or press secretary to the president was most likely. We don't see that happening here in our political process. Multiple people speaking. It makes us vulnerable. At the end of the day, they put people there who are terrible. We don't know what's happening with the president. We don't get no, and not just only the government. You have donors, you have friendly government. These are people who also happen, and when there is no communication, it becomes so terrible and so bad off. Do you think with your experience and occupying that position for that lengthy period of time, do you think it's time to shift the conversation that these people, those that are seeking the higher office of the land, it's time now for us to get a sense of people who are going to be around them?
I think to some extent some of them are doing so, but there are structural issues that we have to take into consideration, which is a little bit slightly different from the reference you made to the US with Jane Saki and Badi and all of that. So two things that will happen. Prior to getting to an election, each of these people who want to be president belong to an institution. They are part of a political institution. And your political institution has a leadership structure. So say, I'm a member of the Unity Party. So until you reach to the point where you are now in campaign mode, constituting campaign team that will have campaign spokesperson, campaign this, campaign that, before you get to that point, the party structure has a role. So the Secretary General, for example, or the Secretariat, let me not say the Secretary General, the Secretariat is that face of what you're looking for as for somebody who's supposed to be having that engagement. So in the Unity Party, they got the Secretary General, they got Deputy Secretary for this, Deputy Secretary for that, they got Deputy Secretary for Media and blah, 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 blah. So until you have a campaign structure, it is these people who should be having that engagement that you saw Jane Saki then having. When you reach to the point where they constitute a campaign team, then what that campaign team will be complemented by the party structure, that campaign spokesman takes the giant share of that responsibility now. Now, doesn't necessarily mean that campaign spokespersons are the ones who are taking over to be press secretary or minister of information. Not necessarily. Samuel Twe, I remember he was campaign spokesperson of the CDC. Maybe they felt he was a talkative, he could talk and blah, 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 so he had to be there. But he was made Minister of Finance. Eugene Nambe, for example, my friend and brother Eugene Nambe was not part of the CDC campaign structure because up to the point they were constituting their campaign structure, he was Secretary General of the Unity Party. So by the time he could fit in until the election finished, he didn't have any real engagement with what the CDC was doing until the election finished. So somebody else was doing the campaign spokesperson, somebody was handling communication. But when the government came to power, they know Eugene is a communicator. I work with him. I know politically speaking, he's one of the best of political communicators that any government will want. Yeah, every time somebody can decide to just do things the way they want to do it, so now you want to be playful, like so now because maybe you want to address certain thing a certain way, you want to be cheeky sometimes, which is a part of the game. But he's a smart guy. So what did they do? They asked him to be their information minister. When they took him from there, they went to another person who was nowhere around that campaign activity. And trust me, he's always been like that. People were accusing during Ellen government, people used to accuse him to be a sedition. You don't really see this guy in party business jumping around wearing party t-shirt. And I'm talking about Leger who ran it. He always tried to, maintain a political line. I remember all the time he worked with the UP government. I didn't see him at any political function wearing UP t-shirt. I haven't seen one on the CDC. All right, so they put him there because they felt he probably could do the job. So I'm saying this to say, probably even if you start seeing those faces, it would not necessarily mean that those faces will be the ones who occupy those positions eventually when they win the elections. Sometimes at the back of their mind, people have their plans on what they want to happen, right? So
look at it. Yeah, this is online. Does the party then speak all candidates running on the political on the party's ticket?
If you want to be structural, it should be like that. But what I see happening in Liberia, that's not necessarily the case. That party structure is basically communicating for the standard bearer and vice standard bearer. And all these other candidates, like senatorial representative candidates, they have their own mechanism that they're using to get to their people to address things concerning their campaign. Yeah, but maybe generally, you may not be speaking for them. Generally, sometimes maybe when they're having their press takeout or something, You talk about your candidate because you got to be sure that your party is able to win more seats in the Senate or the House of Representatives. But most of the campaigns, from my own experience, for people at those levels are driven by themselves. They have their own arrangement, they have their own organization, they have their own staff. And these people at the level of the party are always focused on the big picture, stand-up bearer and his vice stand-up bearer. Because it is these two people who, when they win the election, means the party has won the election. If they lost, no matter how many people win Senate and representatives, the party lost the election. So will be a good thing for the person who asked the question. Yes, I think in a structural society, I think it's a good thing. In our case, things are not really structured. So what the guys normally do, they concentrate on how, if you got some money, how they go from village to village, town to town, giving people handout, divine back or rest. They feel that that is effective and that will get them to the finish line. Then this structural communication that people will hardly listen to. So they prefer those unconventional things which you don't see in the US. Nobody, you just had your elections here. You didn't see nobody who wanted to go back to Congress or want to be senator, party and want to be buying rest and blah, blah, as a means of people to vote. They go around discussing ideas, discussing programs, discussing policies, that people will judge them by and decide what the values they represent is what they want. Therefore, they can decide to vote for them.
Okay, quickly.
In the primitiveness of our system, we're still far from that. People don't look at people. That's why in your history, you can reflect that there were people who wanted to be president who said they were not going to debate. They didn't go to debate. They didn't discuss an issue, and it didn't take anything away from them. Their voters were stuck to them, and they wanted them.
Okay. So with the proliferation of the social media now, which is, of course, is changing the world to some extent and impacting or in different forms and different shape. But I know during the presidency of your former boss, what we see happening now, it was not to that extent. Let's pick this question here from one of our onliners here, Mamint Esther Tapi Mo. Social media news spread faster than the paper. How will that be handled? Say you were the presidential press secretary today, in today's world, with this sort of news, tweet, people saying things, and everything more or less president. How do you think the office of the press secretary can react to those things? Because we're seeing the changes social media is causing in other parts of the world, continent, and all of that. And that cannot be overlooked. Is the office keeping eyes on the social media with respect to what is coming from ordinary citizens of their country? Are they keeping close eyes?
The office does. Of course, I must confess to say, within the context of Liberia, I haven't seen that be done effectively, even during my own tenure as press secretary to the president, Lorraine. Even during my own tenure, I didn't see that. We didn't. Under President Sally, maybe it was because the new media was just emerging. We didn't have an effective social media presence. But the good part about it is that at that time, social media was not fiery and bursting as it is now. 1 minute, hold on.
Yes. Okay, well, folks, just bear with us. I mean, a lot is unfolding. So, and I hope we will continue this. We will try to reach out to other people, their own experiences in past government as presidential spokesperson to press secretary. Go ahead, Mr. P.
Yeah, so it's different now, but what you see politicians doing all around the place, my brother, even here in your own country, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, whoever, all these people are very active themselves on social media. They're not just waiting for even their spokesman. I follow the president of Zambia. They call him HH. His two names in H, so he's popularly called HH. During his campaign, and since he became president, everything about that guy is on social media. Everything. He's at one occasion where he's about to speak. He's going live in his own name, not in the name of, for example, say the Zambian presidency. But his name reflects, because and the reason why he's doing that is, as popular as he is, as soon as the people see his name popping up,
his handles will follow.
Yeah, everybody jumping behind his straight. They want to know why have man on again. If you are going to be doing some of the Zambian presidency, it will not attract people there, because the people got attracted to it. That's why he won the election convincingly. In fact, mind you, he won an incumbent, somebody who was already sitting down as the person he flocked. And many leaders around Africa are doing. I see Nana Akufo-Addo in Ghana, very active on social media. In Sierra Leone, the wife of the president there is even more active on social media than her husband, Fatima Manadio. Yeah. People are making use of social media, and I think that evolution should affect everywhere, including our own country. And I don't want to be critical. The reason why when you and I were talking, I kept making reference to it depends on who in the executive mansion. Things will not be the same, the personnel will not be the same, but there are several things as a professional in the area that I disagree with the people who are the handler of Mr. Wia's office, the press secretary. So many things happening that I don't agree with, but they have their own challenges too. So I don't talk to them direct, but if you work in a place and you leave from there, when new people come, they will not sack everybody there. So we have our ears on the ground, right? And because we have our ears on the ground, we are also aware that they have their own challenges, that some of the privileges we have, they don't have it. For example, the procedure I told you about with the president starting a day with the press secretary, national security advisor, that has never been continued since the new government came to power. The president does not have the patience for that to go sit down with one press secretary be telling you why in the media.
How do you know this?
Oh, I say I have my ears on the ground. So they don't do it. So for example, if I wanted to go to President Selly's office as a press secretary, nobody under the sun and under the heaven will stop me. So I can walk from my office, go straight to the president's office. The agent in charge, who is a security personnel, is the one who, when somebody is inside, maybe the president having a meeting with somebody that I didn't know about when I came out. One of that situation, he would tell me, say, Chief, she in meeting with John Brown, so you gotta wait. Because he's aware of everybody who will be in the office with the president. When he knows the president is in the office alone, when I get there, you will open the door because the doors are fingerprinted. You open the door. I will put my head in. If the president was doing something for which you want me to wait a little bit, I mean, for every time the door opens, you look for here. So, for example, if you didn't want to see me right away, you say, Mr. P, I 1 minute. Then the security guy will close the door, and I'll be just around where they are. And she has a bell there, and she will ring the bell. When she rings the bell, that means she's calling the security man attention to open the door again. At that point, when the security man opened the door, he will put his hand and just say, tell Mr. P to come. Now, that situation is not the same now. And I told you my ears are on the ground.
Let me tell you that. I hope we will try to tap into more of this here. I know we have a 1 hour. The time has already elapsed here. So let me ask you this question here. This is quite interesting. I know usually when there's exchange of power, ministry, and you are at liberty, you want to plead the fifth or whatever it is, because that's a hectic job. That I know, and it is. I used to call and stuff like that. When you were leaving, was there any briefing to give a run through of not actually tutoring, but to give them a clear picture? This is where we're stopping, and this is so. Was there any sort of note sharing? Do you remember?
So what I know is that that transition was chaotic. There was already formed opinions against people who served in our regime, except for those who they knew collaborated with them. I was unapologetically critical and had no interest in seeing Mr. Weah being president, even as press secretary. He and his followers knew that. So once he won the election, there were people who they believe, just as the government was inaugurated, you needed to be finding your way out. In fact, prior to that, there was something that came out that in the Liberian context we used to call it the blacklist. But the way they here land it, they call it a rest list. There were people who they listed, a long list of people who they said, under no condition they wanted to see those people in government under the CDC.
Wow.
My name was on that list. So I knew that once the inauguration took place, as of the date of the inauguration, my desk was clear. Now, but to the credit of the people who took it over, even though he didn't do it immediately, like 3 months into his tenure as press secretary, Sen Mana gave me a call one afternoon, and he wanted some pieces of advice. And we spoke. And it's unprofessional to divulge what we spoke about. But at least he called. He was humble enough to call, and we had a conversation. I'm not too sure that some of the things I told him may have worked it, particularly if the environment was different. And as we all know the story, he didn't last. He was one of the shortest press secretary in the country's history. When Solo Kepler was named press secretary, he also called and reached out to me. When Smith Toby was named deputy press secretary, he called, reached out to me just for late child and advancement. So to their credit, they all did that, which was humbling, because you don't come to those positions with arrogance.
So let me call you. Did they call reflected into the purpose of the phone call, or they were just calling, okay, Ali, we're reaching out here. But do you see those calls bearing out? Honestly?
Well, it depends. That's why I said, so whatever I advise them, if the system that is working there is different, because my advice had to be based on the system I was running.
Okay.
If that system is different from what they have, then that advice will be meaningless, for example. So,
all right.
Because like I was just telling you before you brought the other question in, I didn't have to seek the authorization of anybody working in the president's office. But I'm told that the press secretary currently does not even have that freedom. And that if the chief of protocol says you're not seeing the president, you're not seeing the president. So sometimes they go to work the whole week, and they will only see the president in corridor movement, but they don't have an opportunity to be in the office, sit down with the president one-on-one like we did every day, except probably 5 days a week. And sometimes when the president goes to, because President Selig, maybe one of the things was because she was aging and maybe now married, for her husband to be demanding from, hey, you're president by your husband, you got to be who I need your time to. So she had interest in staying too long in the office. And you ask anybody who worked with the president, there were many times we leave the office after 10 o'clock in the night. Because the general staff, everybody can remain when she's staying on, but there are certain people you can leave. The security people can leave, the press secretary can leave, but protocol people can leave. The national security advisor, of course, you can leave while the president is staying in office, so that the family, myself, Mrs. Cooper, the late Mrs. Cooper, the EPS people, we will always be the one to overstay her secretary, her personal secretary, executive secretary, who was Mrs. Fassama. These are people who had to be in the office until the president leaves. So when the president leaves 10 o'clock, we hear her convoy moving, then we had to go back to our offices, close down before we go. So almost 5 days a week, as somebody who was living all the way in Broadville, I used to be home between 11:30 to 12 midnight every day. And then I have to be back to the office the latest 8 a.m. on the next working day. So that's what I said. Working with her directly was strenuous because at the Ministry of Information, sometimes we get an office, we start our working day 9 o'clock, right? At the executive mansion, now I could go to the Ministry of Information at the executive mansion. Sometimes the president comes to office 7:30. Okay. I pull her down, she's not going straight to her office. She get on the 5th floor and going from office to office. So she gets to where was the PR? So because of the kind of work I did, sometimes I have engagement at the radio station. So they say, oh, well, most of the time when he got engagement at the radio station, he would not come until after the show. So say he's going to go to ERBC from Broadway, They've been trying to see how you beat the traffic to go to EFBC. You're not going to sit down in your office. So she knew that. So after some time without understanding, the officers should be entering, asking people, she would not enter. Sometimes in the morning, she got certain things that came out that she wanted to know about it. And she would call me, why I have not come to the office. Sometimes she do it from home. So, Pierre, you having some of your radio appearances today? Yes, Madam President, I went to Prime FM or I went to the okay, I just wanted to bring this situation to your attention since you'll be on air. You know, so it was different because I had to, as press secretary, I had to have a number directly. So if I have a concern when I have to work and there's something I think I need to know about or follow her on, I call her. And because the number was saved in her phone, she will answer. When she got an issue, she will call me. So
she was she spontaneous to your phone call?
Oh, obviously, you call president. Essentially, she's at a program. When she had a program, I would know I wouldn't call her. Or early in the morning, I know when she used to wake up early in the morning, she goes into a swimming pool, swim for 1 hour. So I don't know the difference between when she'll be in the swimming pool. Of course, when I call, but when she's there, when you call the phone is never alone. So when you call the phone, Mrs. Toast, for example, would be having the phone if she'd do another thing. And she would say, oh, the president is doing her morning exercise. The president is doing this. But we'll call you back after she's done. So yes, continuous. There's no time. I don't remember any time where I called and if I didn't talk to her directly, where the call was not returned.
Mr. Pierre, thank you so much. The time where they didn't do our favor, yeah, hopefully we need. I think we need to be having this conversation here. But lastly, here, if the president is making a reshuffle, dismissal, is the press secretary being debriefed of that as well? Do you have an idea before that pronouncements are made?
But you make the pronouncement. Nobody makes the pronouncement. So maybe in making a decision that she wants to do that, maybe you will not be in the picture. But because it is you who put it out, so it gets to you before it gets up because it is you who will put it out.
Okay.
So nobody put that part of the communication role. The press release that we announced that the president has dismissed this person or they've reshuffled the person going to this place. It's on the signature of the press secretary. So you're not just going to see the information out because you putting it out.
Let me put you like a club between the sisters. If you were in Qatar today as a presidential press secretary, will you be providing briefings to the Liberian people? Don't you think that is part of your responsibility?
Well, it is, but again, I keep saying about the environment. If the president thinks that talking too much about his press people will bring more public attention, more focus and stuff, and he doesn't want that, the press secretary will not do that even if he wanted to do it. So, for example, I think Mo Ali has written some things and Jonathan Pelede have made a report to the BBC. And it was the first briefing the first press release I ever saw for all the time the president stayed in Qatar, under the signature of Solo Kebe. And when I read the press release, in fact, we have a show that we call the Class Reloaded. I don't know whether you know about that.
Of course.
So I talk about it on the Class Reloaded, and I did say to Solo Kebe that you should have your head bow, that your signature is on this release. And let me say this, it's good you brought this, or this one, then we end it. You see, government, my dear brethren, there will be supporters and followers. But there will also be a lot of people who are angry, who don't like the government. And you who's speaking for the government about what they're doing, you are so much. So for example, a lot of people had their own thought about Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, right? So when you're speaking for President Sirleaf, just by extension of the fact that you speak for, you are an enemy to a lot of people. People hate you for that. The same thing is happening right now. A lot of people are angry about we are. So when his communicators come and try to speak on things about him, they also place them in that hate category. They hate them. Some people want to see them dead. You saw Samuel Toy having an accident. Yeah, I'm a very critical person of that government. But I wouldn't celebrate anybody's accident. I wouldn't celebrate anybody's death.
No.
They'll do it themselves. Nobody can get Lauren Husband died. Sedition was celebrating all over after he died tragically on a road accident. So that just tells you that the society gets so polarized. hatred is intensified. That you who's speaking for people who the public is angry with, you yourself become a big enemy of the people. Friends used to ask me sometimes, we see government people running around with security. You didn't have security. All the time I serve in government, from gender to Ministry of Information to the executive mansion. I did not want security guarding me nowhere. Never had any assigned security. The only time I saw security personnel, and they were not necessarily assigned to me, was after the 2011 elections. CDC was threatening a lot of things. Security people had gathered information that people will be trained petrol bomb, will be doing that. So the security developed a plan overnight to just be doing monitoring, passing at government officials' places. So at that time, the president gave my name. They called me. They wanted to know where I live. I know that. Even then, sometimes when I was sleeping, then I see their car passing around. But it was just for that period. And when that tension left. So as best as I tried my best, you know how many people saw me as an enemy because they didn't like the president I was speaking for or the government I was speaking for? So that's why you need to be very careful. So someone wrote a press statement. It was long, but my attention went to a few things. Number one, he said, the people who are angry that the president is in Qatar watching his son, they are envious. And two, because someone didn't get children or they didn't get child, so they don't know the importance of child. How is that a release that should come from the office of a president? Even if I were the press secretary and Mr. We are wanting me to read our trash, I would tell Mr. President, you can't do this. Nobody envy you. The people who are complaining, they are your employers. If you were here as a private person and not president, nobody will have time for what you're doing here. Those who are complaining is because they made you their president, you are their president. We cannot say they are envious of you. Your employer, where you sit down, where my sister who just came on Koto works somewhere. Will Koto say or employer envy her? Does that make any sense to anybody? The people are the employer of the president. So if they are complaining about the president leaving their country for 48 days, nobody does that. There's no record in history of any president who will leave their country and go stay for 48 days, except you went on some medical procedure that your recovery process will take that long before you get in plane to fly. It's never happened before. So when the people who employ you complaining, you read a press statement and say they are envious of you, and they're doing it because they didn't get children. Oh, God doesn't give everybody children though. Some are barren. But you don't mock them for being barren. So how is that a communication that should come from the office of the president? And I also asked the guy, I was talking to one of them who called me 2 days ago, and I was saying to the guy, I said, how is it possible to do that? Who's advising you guys? Who's thinking? You're even responding to a journalist, Jonathan Pelele, who writes for the BBC. I don't remember doing a press release that would target a journalist, responding to that journalist in particular. I don't remember doing a press release that would target Vendetta Patrick. They were all in advocacy doing different things. I don't remember doing a press release that would target Vendetta Patrick. It would target the issue. But when you read a press release, it's on Mo Ali. You read a press release, it's on Jonathan Pelele. You read a press release that say the people envy you. You read a press release that say they post that because someone didn't get children. How does that come from the office of a president? And so what I told that guy, I said, well, even when you ain't doing the right thing, people will hate you. You got too much enemy.
Oh, yeah.
But when you're doing it the wrong way, your enemies will multiply. And then what you have to consider is there's left after the office. Will you fit into the society? Will your voice be credible? I'm on a class, we know there are other places, and I do what I do because I ensure that the way I conducted myself, my voice still matters for the country. It still has the credibility that it needs. And that's why you have to think about when you're in this public space. Don't forget, the government job is a borrowed jacket. You wear it today, Koto will wear it tomorrow. Thank you. It was a pleasure having me here.
Thank you so much. Hopefully, we're going to really go much deeper. I think it is important for the good of our country. We need to have this civil conversation because putting people without hair in high-profile positions is killing our country. Just, Pierre, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Okay, well, folks, there you have it. It's quite interesting. Let's say Goya is here. Our own sister Koto is here with us here. Look, The bleaching, it has to be done not just only one place. We need to bleach the surroundings of the office, the higher office of the land, in this case, the presidency. And we hope to be having this sort of conversation here. Let me bring in the man from the far right. Amos George is here. We want to welcome our sister, Sister Koto. Thank you for being here. Who wants to be a presidential press secretary here?
No, sister.
Sister, you sure?
Why you beating somebody up?
Koto, do you want to be a presidential press secretary?
Absolutely.
That's not my era. I know my era.
I think I will have fun. Mr. Joyce said no, but I think the press would not want to come to the briefing.
How will you be a presidential press secretary that you think the press will not want to come there?
I will be way too available and will be way too just cerebral about it, and will be too logical. I will be teaching some press people how to ask questions. Seriously.
Okay. Ladies, gentlemen, thank you for joining us here. I thought of doing this because I felt a lot of conviction was ongoing, what is happening, but now we getting to know. And I do agree with him. There's a big difference depending who is in the Oval Office. I spoke with Mr. Patrick Coleman, who was then press secretary to Samuel Doe. You have Jerome with Helen Johnson Sirleaf and other people, but it's a very hectic position. So let's say, lady first, we want to welcome Koto. Thank you so much for coming here this evening. It's all about the country here. My guess you listen to the former presidential press secretary. It's a hectic job. What was the new thing that you learned from him, or maybe for the first time hearing as a presidential press secretary? We have a current president who is out of the country. I'm not sure the wing of how you call it, USA Today, which of course I'm a resident here, so I want them to win. But I'm thinking, scratching my head, what's going to happen next? Will he still going to be there? Whatever the case, we don't know. But what have you learned this evening here, just hearing from the former presidential press secretary?
Okay, good evening to my fellow guests. Thank you so much, Mr. So for letting me to be here again. My name is up there, Koto Jala Balayam. I am president in New Jersey. I used to be in New York, but I moved to New Jersey. And I thank you so much for having me here. You know, I'm one of those that I like to add my voice to the many voices that, love Liberia. And I think for some way or the other, we all love Liberia, but for some of us, we are deeply, in love with our country and like to see the best out of Liberia. Having heard from Pia, I know the president she was, that is Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and like everything he said, except that that he was like, I kept all of the times there because at the time I used to live in Cinco, we knew when, she would pass, and I knew she was that type that she leaves late for work and pass early, But I learned, something from her that I don't know what a minute we mean learn it. And I was one of those that used to even call me Madame Sirleaf. My whole family member, they always have that nickname for me, Madame Sirleaf. But at some point, I'm like, I like to be myself. I don't like people calling me, some name. I like to be myself. Let me be who I am, even though I will see what she's doing and, admire, what she does. But again, I do it in my way or better than what she did. But again, this is somebody that we saw, this President Ellen, that we saw some genuine leadership in, at the time, because I was one of those that actually ran campaign for Ellen, and I don't regret it. And we saw that she was competent for the job, and you could see the passion was in her, that she really wanted the job done. It's the only thing. Maybe if I'm near her right now, I saw what led to your second turn, the way it ended up, the last turn. But I know she is the type that workaholic, and she actually wanted to see something done good for Liberia, because I didn't work with government, but for the period of time I met with her or talked with her, you could see that she really wanted something good out of Liberia. And even if she went, for fellowship or even went to speak to other areas, she galvanized fund to improve the life of women. So having her peer, discussing all of these things of how he worked, with her, I thought, that's just her. You know, she wanted to see something done. She would make sure it is done. And it wasn't that she wait and information comes to her. She also was somebody that she was on top of the information also. She didn't wait to say, okay, let my press officer come and let me, and inform me. Except that some that she would not be aware of, but she also was on top of information. Okay.
So basically, it's not like an unusual something, knowing who she is, and so the people that she was bringing around to you anticipated something of such wouldn't be a strange thing to you, correct?
Exactly, because she always look for people who she thought would be of help with her job, because that's what a leader should do. You kind of reduce your workload by getting competent people assigned to a particular job, because if you do it by doing that, you are reducing your tax, because this job will be done, and they will be done if it is not exactly your way. But again, like he readily said, that he will like advise that can it be done this way, and that's what good leaders do.
Okay.
You suggest, and or inject in what the person's idea is, because that's why you trusted the person for the job or a particular job. So you look up to them to do a particular task. You will only come in to inject or seek their advice. And I think that's what she did, because there were a lot of competent. Some people would say she has some incompetent people, okay, but many times she was looking for people that she thought that could do the job, not just
Okay.
friends, family. Yes.
Let me bring in. Okay. Let me bring in Sissy. Sissy, we try to go within the inner wall of the presidency. For the most part, we say, oh, handler, we're talking pumpkin palm pumpkin, groundhog, elephant, and all of that. But from what I gathered tonight, she was just not only president, but she was also involved. She was also on top of the game. She was looking at newspaper based on what we heard from Pia. Even if there was a secondhand information, she also want to verify whether that information is correct or not, or give who the government officials that is involved, hey, if you show this is not going right, you need to speak to it, and not just on the surface to just come in your defense and wash it down. What does that tell you comparing then and now? And even those who even are seeking for this office, what should we be concerned with?
So the credit come from another water and say I didn't get the IRA, right? I can't say that's true or that's false, because I'm not under the water with the credit and the alligator. Jeremy Pierre, is a gifted speaker. He's a very intellectual guy. I give it to him. But he's the town crier. And in our villages, we know the town crier only carries the message, but the message is not crafted by the town crier.
Mm-hmm.
And so the town chief determines when the town crier is going to come out and how the town crier is going to talk about the issues through what prism. Because remember, when you speak as a presidential press secretary, you're speaking from an angle. You're speaking through a prism. You want people to interpret this message through given glasses you're giving them. You want them to read this through the frame. You're almost like a magician. You're doing smokes and mirrors. And you want these people to be, for the attention to be, we used to go down on the side, the boys and do, go, you get it when you win, you get it when you lose. They're directing your eye to where they want you to lose. And that's what presidential press secretaries do. So for me, I was just interested in trying to find out how the inner working of the Madame Salif press secretary office was, because it's going to vary from president to president. The president is the message crafter. They determine how and through what prison that message is going to be carried. There are some presidents that will, want a lot of press interaction. Some of them might not. Right here in America, Donald Trump was using, for the most part, Twitter. When Barack Obama had a lot of press briefing, more than Donald Trump, and Joe Biden have had more than even Donald Trump. Donald Trump used a different method, right? And so the problem for me is not that. But, my only thing is, my sister, nice seeing you, welcome. But I'm not too quick to start to write the Hallelujah Amen speech for Madam Ellen Johnson Sirleaf government yet, though. Because when we all still look at the most recent history, now, this is somebody I expected to have done well. Like she did. I actually expected her to have done much better. Remember, she's been campaigning for the presidency since after the 1985 elections. So she had been campaigning for it for a very long time. And so to my sister's point, when she said, she would have asked a question about the difference between the first term and the second term. The first term is a campaign term. You're campaigning, you're doing everything because you want to put you back there. Your second term is actually when we try to see your substance. And sadly, the substance of Madam Sirleaf in the second term was lacking. Let's just be very frank with that. There were a lot of hiring that she did that were not right. There was a lot of nepotism. We all know that. She hired all her children, right? Were there now more qualified librarians? She hired Otello Gonga. Otello Gonga, who was Minister of Education when I was in 4th grade, should be back at Education Ministry. So let's be fair. But the issue here, though, was that I think Gerald Lemick, what I was a little bit disappointed about was that he spoke mainly about reaction. What's in the news? How do you react to it? What's in here? My bigger question that I had was, how did they present information when they were the presenter of information? So you're not reacting to nothing. You are coming to give the news. Who crafted their news? Who crafted their message? And what channel did they want you to look at it through? So, for example, I'm thinking about Harry Greaves' death. I'm thinking about the situation with Willie Knuckles when his laptop was found and those nude pictures were on it. Who crafted the way the executive mansion press was going to handle that? Because those were times where we saw the failure of the press secretary office of Madam Sirleaf. So for me, I learned a few things that, yeah, it is a hectic job, but I did come to this with the understanding that every president will have their own mindset on how they want to interact with the press and through what prism they want to grab that message and how do they want you to see it.
Okay, so Dr. Toto, welcome. Mr. George.
Yeah.
What was the new thing you learned here? You say you don't want to be the presidential press secretary. I mean, every day you see the president briefing and all of that. You want to be presidential press secretary?
Mr. So say how you doing, Dr. Toto? How you doing? Look,
Hey,
it's one of the highest jobs to have in the country. Because if you are not careful, you become the worst man in the country in the eyes of people who don't like that government. Because everything you say, they will not look like from the angle that you're speaking for somebody, like you are defending that person. So it's a very difficult job. And if you are not careful, hey, sometimes people want to stone you in the street. But, Madam Sirleaf, I know her very well. The second term of Madam Sirleaf, it was not okay. Because even most of the people she appointed, maybe some people don't know. It was her partisan or friends' children that she appointed. I can tell you because we were Madam Sirleaf, group of us. So I know. You see, the guy was the Minister of Information, Dr. Brooklyn. Dr. Brooklyn's father was, I think, treasurer of LAP, Treasurer Secretary General Nando Brooklyn. He used to work with the African Development Agriculture or something. Then Kesselly, who the late Defense Minister Bian Kesselly, her son, she sent him to Maritime. So there were a whole lot of people that some all knew the connection to the Liberian Action Party and political event in Liberia during the late 1980s and things like that. So those were people she brought in that she knew in government and gave those children very lucrative position because of the parents' connection to the politics and the Liberian Action Party. Some all knows all those things. So really, I don't like to give her. I like her, but on the issue of governance of the country, I saw a whole lot of lapses that I don't want to dwell into, you know, because my sister was talking on her, we saw Harry Green. Harry Green was someone with her from the 1980s, the Liberian Action Party. Harry Green Sr., the junior, everybody. The late Ralph Phillip was killed on P Avenue in his house. That house, that was the Liberian Action Party. On Pins Avenue there. We were the people here, so I know a whole lot. And those things. But look at what happened to Harry Green. The way he died, the way he was murdered today, there's no, that crime has not been solved on her. And there were other high-profile killings that took place in Liberia on her regime. And because what they used to tell us, that this thing will not happen on our watch. And we saw the very thing happening on our watch. Yeah, I mean, people can talk about the good side, but when we try to dive into this era, then of course, the leadership of her, it became questionable. The country that what happened, that she went to jail for, she was advocating for, it's not what really, when she came to power, that we saw on her. So for the press secretary, yes, as he said, it's always different from leader to leader. And we can see someone in the mansion to deal with President Weah, but you can see the way the press called the press secretary of that office is looked like, because Sekou Kalako is not the press secretary. You can almost say Sekou Kalako is the press secretary, just like he don't speak. I don't know, he's the press secretary or chief photographer or what. I don't know what job to get him now. But
he's a special A, not presidential press secretary. He's a special A.
Even so, I know the man, but that's a title special A. But what the man does, the man when I post all the pictures. So you wonder, is that the job of the special aid? Or the press secretary was supposed to be getting all the information out? But it's Sekou Kalako. He's now the press secretary, the chief photographer of the president's office, and the aide to the president. These are the guys who running the show. So Kevin told me then to get there to collect the check. Because if these guys, what Pierre said, if the guy was seeing the president daily, on a daily basis, briefing the president on issues in the news.
But okay, but you know, but he was also quick to point out, depending who is the elephant that is in the room.
That's what I'm saying.
Is the elephant is willing to play around with the baby elephants as well, or like, you know what, I am here, I'm gonna get this thing here. But from what we heard this evening, Mana Helen Johnson Sirleaf, there was a routine when she comes, sit with her security council, whatever, get briefing from the press. That was a normal routine because she feels that's something very cardinal, something very important. But it appears from all what we're seeing, I am not there, but it appears like there's a different dawn in there. Let me bring in Dr. George Toto. Dr. Toto, are you there? Good evening.
Yeah, I'm okay. Also,
yeah. Should we be concerned because all of these things here, presidential spokesperson, press secretary, hey, you carry the rendezvous of the president, you manage the activities, the schedule. There were other things I wanted us to go into. We didn't go into that. Hopefully sometimes we will try to do that. But I think it's time for us to start having conversations with with these important things surrounding the Oval Office here, because you got to have competent people or somebody that get a guts, the balls to even, out of a crowded player to raise your finger to your boss to say, hey, this is how it should be done. But it's also a difficult scenario when you have somebody who is not willing to move in that direction. Then it puts you in a very volatile position oh, should I continue this job here? Or if I get out of this job here, my family will not have anything on the table. It's not like America. I can leave one job, you can leave one job and go to another. But Liberia, hey, it's sometimes you could be antagonized for that. Oh, this guy, yeah, he's not one of us, or he's not willing to get this done. So, what was the new thing learned here this evening? What kind of presidential press secretary do we want to see in the Oval Office?
Yeah, let me just say that it was a very good discussion with Pia. Pia is a very good friend of brother. You know, I know the only thing about myself I don't agree on when it comes to soccer.
Oh,
you know,
why?
Pia know that when it comes to soccer, we disagree on when it comes to some of the famous players in the world. But when it comes to the presidential or the press secretary of Liberia, first of all, look at about Eddie Johnson Selly. Eddie Johnson Selly came from she have that good government structure that she had been in before, even for the private sector, in other organizations, work in high level organization. So she came from that background, you know. So even she transformed that in her presidency to have that type of structure, and maybe most especially kind of a press secretary. I can recall when we met her, our quarter met by the Eddie Johnson City when she was president in her office, you know. And I can recall when we met her in her office and the press was there, she worked with the press and the press secretary. I think Pia was in that meeting also too. And then we had a very good discussion and I saw the engagement of the press and the press secretary. And then after certain time, she put the press also. She said, okay, she told the press, you guys excuse me, that talk off the record. She said that we should talk off the record. She put the press also. And while we discussed, I was not discussing the meeting, I was not disclosing here. It was a talk that we had, you know. But it was real structure, you know, the press secretary was there, you know, coordinated the affair of that meeting. Sarah's body was in that meeting also too. What the then press secretary, I think PR was not the secretary at that time. I think he would assist, you know, to Sarah's body, if I'm not mistaken. But Sarah was in that meeting, you know, and Sarah was taking note. It was a real structured meeting we had, as compared to when I met President Weah. When I met President Weah, also to see the difference, you know, and I don't want to look like I want to bomb up the government, but from what I saw from Madam Johnson, from Eddie Johnson Senate presidency, the kind of high level meeting that we have with her as compared to President Weah, it was far different. It was completely far different. There was no real organized or structural meeting. In fact, we did not even go into the meetings here. Tony Blair, they said Tony Blair came, he was a high profile person, so they had to bomb her, you know. And they said the best place to go see him, was to go see him to that Jamaica resort, you know. So you see, if you see the enrichment that was made, and you see how the press was engaged, even though Eddie has a other downside also too when it comes to media engagement also, but she was the face of the media also too. She engaged Liberian people through the media when there's a critical issue that affect the nation or other things. She will address the nation. She will come out. She would, as compared to the current president, when there's a critical issue, he would be very silent. He would not talk. until maybe you'll be through some recording and thing before you come out. But it will take days. But any media was not like that. Her press team was up there giving information, disseminating information, as compared to, you know, where we are, when we are first press secretary, were complete mess up. What about my friend and brother? He was a first press. What about what he did before the brought or to the
Sam Manning?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, Sam Manning. Yeah, but Sam Manning. When Sam Manning was a press secretary, I don't know Sam. I don't know Sam to have press background or journalism background whatsoever. I don't know how he went to become press secretary for the first time. But you saw how President Weah at that time how the whole press sector was a complete mess. You tell me disseminated information. The how kind of brought Toby Smith in to do that branding. And then Toby started bringing the press to the public, do that engagement and Toby tried to brand that whole media publicity of the president. You know, so you can see we saw some developments or improvement into it. You know, but again, it depends on the type of briefing that the president had with his press team before they put the information out. It's also play a major factor in it. But Eddie to me, she has a more structured team as compared to the current president in terms of putting the information out.
Okay, let me bring in Koto here. I don't know where is the improvement, but honestly, I think it's horrible and it is still horrible. Almost a year, I remember there was released the executive mansion and they agreed that their communication skill was terrible, it was poor, and they vowed to pivot, to change, but I don't see it yet. Yeah, we are. I remembered Samuel Doe, he who was a military person. When Doe is traveling, all right, you will get to know the full detail. You get to know the delegations, the official delegation. I'm not talking about security details. Even when the AD camp is traveling, they are AD camp. But I heard somebody saying, "Oh, they will call press secretary." Of course, the press secretary is almost like a ministerial position. Down to even the butler, all of those people, you will get the full details of those people here, and you will. Is it? I don't know. Is it because of the social media? Where is the State Broadcasting Corporation in this whole thing here? Our guys still carrying. I saw the other day, so people were pushing them. They were pushing you because of the things that you travel with. You see people using modern technology, and you say you're covering president. You're using cell phone. You're not serious. You're not ready. They're going to pull you aside. So I don't know. Is it because, and like what Pierre said, you who in charge, you have to add value to your office as well. Maybe he doesn't know. He doesn't know. Let's pretend he doesn't know because that's not his area. But it is your area. You have to add value. Look, Mr. President or Mr. Minister, I am the public affairs director here. You need to put something into place to make sure that you market that institution or that entity where you find yourself. Koto, let me bring you in here. Dr. Toto said it's still, I don't know whether it was then or now that they are doing well. Are they doing well? Yeah, we are. We have no idea. We do know that the day the president left, but there's no information. And for he solo kept with own friend and brothers, schoolmate, classmate, everything together, to get up to say that, to even respond to an individual. I'm not saying Mo Ali is not important. Come on. That is just ridiculous. Somebody's calling. Hopefully they want to participate. But go ahead. While I try to put the person on. Go ahead, Koto.
Yeah, thank you. So you know, when it comes to comparing actually alien leadership we are, I think it's just unfair because I really do not see even close relationship to the leadership ability that she had as compared to what we has. Okay, you see, we are, you know, for me, I personally said that he was not competent to be a leader. But again, we have people in the majority that, voted him. Yes, he our president, so we accept him for who he is. We have then from time to time, incident issues have been occurring over and over, and we see that we have press secretary or even the information ministry to come out, to even like counteract this issue. They are not to the top. They are not to the task. You see, it's like they are always like the issue comes up before they come to defend. For me, they're always on a defensive, journalism that I see. Because if you give the people a chance and don't give them right information, then they tend to seek the right information. Because information dissemination is very important. To get people to understand issues, you have to be on top of them to explain to them what the issue, are. But many times they are always sitting until people, almost can go to strike or rioting before sometimes you see even they come out to kind of defend. So for me, it's kind of defensive. There is no communication, even I don't know, from the presidency down to his information ministry or information press secretary and what have you. I see no communication from them. Only time you see them to come out reporting when people come out to say issue like you were saying. They were reporting the BBC with what Mo Ali then said. You don't wait. From the time he been over there to Qatar, like you rightly said, Mr. So, before the president leaves, there will have been a itinerary of information, who he meets and when and where, and none of these things. We just hear he's there, gone, and it's so sad because we need to be reading these things to know what are the protocol. You see, even the protocol is not as a presidential protocol. Because I, from the background with international relations, there are protocols, so these things, and you see that the protocol is what is mildly used. You see, the Kumba Finda, how they call her, she comes like somebody coming from the market or somebody coming. You don't be behind the president like that and appears like that, You have to be professional, looking to meet other professional people. You get there and you look like, I'm not saying that the body is bad, but the way she presents herself, or it's not decent. You do, as a protocol person, you do not. And all of that it is just a certain that you have to be trained. Even if you didn't know it and got to the presidency, you are to be trained to follow protocol. But these are not there. Everything is just lacking. We sit there, all of the information we need to get, we are not getting. All we know, our president is out of the country. And I heard they were saying that he met with the prime minister. You will see if a president meets another president or high profile, that country, if your country does not, publish the itinerary or the information, it will be at their end where you will read about it, whatever transaction they went to, whether it was a bilateral agreement or whatever it is, you will see it from there. Since our people could not see, all of these things are lacking. No formality. You are in a leadership where nothing is just going right. They try to even educate him. He just cannot follow what he should be following as a president. Because like you rather said, if he was pushing in, the president pushing in, you would definitely see
Yes, I'm here.
the secretary or the information minister coming out to give information as to what our president is doing.
Okay,
But again, we are lacking.
Mr. Pia, I believe you said you wanted to make a clarification on something or speak on something.
Yes, yes, yes. Not clarification necessarily, but
okay, yeah, go ahead.
I don't know whether my sister is still here, Koto talking.
Yeah, I think yeah, it was the echo kind of careful, but it's okay now. Go ahead.
All right, so here was my problem. When you call a guest, you say to the guest why you want to discuss.
Are
So
you listening? Yeah, are you listening to it too?
no, I just trying to cut it off. So okay, so when you I come in 1 minute, just hold on. I want to make sure I cut it off because I think it's still interfering. So the thing is, when you call me to appear on a show, you say, come and let's talk about the office of the press secretary. So the conversation is about the office of the press secretary.
Right.
Your analyst, therefore, should be analyzing the topic under discussion. So when somebody jumps to, which was not what I came for, of course, I work with the Salif government and I can defend the workings of that government if I'm invited on a show to do so. That's a different thing. But if you call me to talk about the office of the press secretary, the working of the press secretary, some of the things we did, how we see things now, and then someone who is an analyst is basically talking about first 10 was good, second 10 was there, Ellen was bad, Harry agreed that, the other how is that the topic of the day? Because your analyst should be analyzing the topic you discuss with your guests. That's one. Two, except Mr. Anuboya or Goya was listening to something other than what we said over there. When he said the conversation was all about reaction. So when we started the conversation and I said, for example, the way the president gone to Qatar, the first thing before the president goes to Qatar, it is the responsibility of the press secretary to say where the president going, why he's going, who's going with him, how long, and eventually while he's there, every positive things that happening there is communicated back to the people. How is that qualified as reaction? Because according to him, everything that was discovered here about reaction. When you talk about the medium of communication, from the beginning when you and I were talking, and I talk about the advent of the new media, social media, how people use it to send information out. How people, in some cases, use outreach. You reach out to a Thai shop in different places. Are those now medium of communication? Of course, press conferences are routine. They are conventional. Every press secretary will have press conferences, media briefing. So it's needless to say that. So he's wrong if he says everything that was talked about was about reaction. Then how he was not listening. And the reason why I put you to call is it looks a little bit unfair when you call a guest and after the guests are left, you bring your analyst, and what an analyst tries to do is to maybe attempt to attack the guests that left the show who would not have the opportunity to respond to some of the things the analysts say. So my late piece of advice, we all don't know all, is that when you call a guest, when your analysts come out, they got to be discussing what you and your guests discussed. You and your guests did not discuss the success and failures of the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf government. You and your guests discussed simply the workings of the office of the press secretary. So for Mr. Boyer to be analyzing and talking about Harry agreed that, Ellen did this, first thing was that, nepotism, if that was a discussion of today, if we're discussing the workings of the Ellen government and then his analysis went in those directions, then it's consistent with the topic. But apparently, the analysis is far off tangent, got no relationship with the topic of the day. And sometimes it's just people use every opportunity to vent how they feel about individual or past regime. And that's so unfair and sad for a professional program that you're having. Your analysis must be tied to and restricted to the topic that was discussed with your guests, and not yelling all over the place.
Okay, hold on 1 second. We're not going to make a hell of a dialogue, but I think Sissy, all right, yeah, okay. I take that into he. I want you to just hold on 1 second. They're still hearing you as well, and we can still communicate. We'll try to spend time here for the rest, and that's one of the reasons we always like to analyze pundits. They will always give their views, their opinion. It doesn't make it a fact, and that's why we give people, we bring guests, give them the opportunity to tell their narrative. Sisid, I know you want to respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, let me give it to Mr. Pia that he's right that the conversation is tangential to the analysis is going tangential to the discussion that he had. But I also want Mr. Pia to, I don't know, he said I didn't listen, but I don't think you were listening to me. In nowhere did I say all of his information was reactive. I said he focused mainly on a lot of reaction. That is different from being absolute to say all of them. And the reason I said that was because you spent a lot of time talking about, when you get this news in the newspaper, when you are coming to the news, you're going to, you have all these newspapers, there's something that pop up about somebody stealing or an example and all those stuff. Those are all about reacting. And I asked the question, when you weren't reacting, when you're presenting the news, which frame were you presenting it through? And that was not even an accusation. It was just me wondering which frame, which prison you present that information through. But to the point where I see Jared Lemek he wants to cherry pick, and I give it to him because the reason the conversation even got to me talking about the Ellen government was when Cisco tried to praise Ellen government. So he didn't even see that as where the tangent started, but he see where I became critical as the issue he has. I get it. We all have our own political.
So Mr. Boya, when I turned into the show in the first place after Zoe and myself got through the ceremony, I left the show.
Oh, okay. So then,
right?
so then,
a lane. When I clicked
my brother,
the lane, it is you who was talking. So whatever.
Okay. All right. Then I apologize. I apologize. Since
because I heard you talking.
Yeah.
I had to respond to your concern because when I listened to you talking, it was all about nepotism and Harry and I started asking myself about it.
So my brother,
the conversation I didn't have, was it about the Ellen government in total, or the host wanted me to discuss the office of the press secretary?
So my brother,
the office of the press secretary with a discussion. How come the analysis is about what Ellen did, what Ellen did not do, what happened first time, what didn't happen first time? So in my mind, then the analysis is completely detached from the topic of the day, and it's unfair to the guests when you do that.
So then, my brother P, I hope you're still listening. So if you judge me based on a fraction of a conversation you had that you listened to, without knowing what precipitated me having that conversation, were you fair to me in that? Because I didn't just get from anywhere to start saying that was Scotto who first said Ellen did all these wonderful things, and I said, well, I'm not yet ready to read the hallelujah amen on the Ellen regime. That was my beginning sentence before I talked about that, and then I pivot back to saying, well, I do understand where Gerald Lemig was coming from to say, and I do believe that every president will craft the message. They are the messengers. Here's how
we end it, bro. Here's how we end it. I don't want to take all your show time. We are all professional. What I'm giving you is a professional advice.
No, but if you try to chastise me based on when it's not professional anymore.
The show discusses a particular topic and bring in a set of analysts to analyze that. That set of analysts comes from what was discussed. So all I'm saying, it makes it look professional for your show that if you call guests and the guest leaves your studio, your analysis should be focused on the discussion of the guest, the topic that the guest discussed, and not all over the place on things that the guest did not come there for. Because, like I said to Zoe, I have worked for the Ellen regime, and if anybody is interested in having a conversation about the success and failures of the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf administration, I'm ever ready to be a part of that conversation. And if that is the conversation, your views will be respected.
Right.
Whether you believe she failed, she didn't fail, that's your view. I'm not going to argue with it. The only reason why I'm raising contention is that was not what the host invited me to discuss. That was not what was discussed. And so for that to be the talking point in my absence,
No, but
Mr. So.
I-
Jeremy Pierre wants to sound like he's giving
Yes.
professional advice,
Yeah.
but he's judging me
We should
on
move
based
on.
on half of information. How is that professional?
Let me address it. Okay, yeah, what happens here? Yeah, LPR here would do it different, and it's not meant. And that's one of the reasons when we bring in our guests, and all of these guys, they represent different political party, some of them independent or whatever groups they are. We also give them the opportunity to express their views and opinion. And that's why when we bring in guests, we go strictly and we tell them to hold on. After that, we profile it. But also bear in mind, people of different background, they're going to be having a conversation. It was still surrounding Helen. And I do agree with you. It was not about the entire administration, the successes, the failure, or what are some of the challenges of the administration. We were looking at the office, the press secretary, office of the press secretary. However, there was something that was injected into it, and when unfortunately you didn't listen to that part. When Koto said, I campaigned for Helen the first time, but the second time it didn't end the way, and that's how CC2 came in. But it wasn't like bringing guests, and after the guests leave, we decide to crucify the guests. No, if it's in like a form of debate to have that, we will be here. And one of the reasons, again, when we bring in guests here, you from different party, he from different party, she from different party. When you bring that tends to dilute the real conversation, because you'll be interrupted, will be responding, and then it will not make it really informative. So, and that's why when we're talking, you saw me allow you to do most of the talking because I wanted to get an insight of what was happening. But there was something. There was antecedent to the concern or questions raised by CC, which is, of course, normal. I know on the class reloader, sometimes things come in, and even like the very CNN, you bring in the, what they call Republican person, Democrat, they were on purpose trying to change the topic. It is left with you, who the person defending a person, to get them back to baseline, But we don't sanction voices here. I think that was square out. And I wanted to make sure to reach out to.
So exactly the point. So when your guest was still on, yes, then he has the freedom to call them back to baseline. The difference there is you are doing.
Why is he still blaming me?
That's okay. We can still go on. That's all right.
So
Mr. So,
the person is
something that preceded there, our statement,
and
it appears to
be,
creating
the
so where's the
what was
yeah, I can't be pretending to be professional when you judge me on half the information. You can't be pretending that.
Unfair, and I wouldn't bend over in making that point. Like I said, it's a piece of professional advice. You can take it, you can leave it. It's okay, but I thought it was fair for me to express it.
Okay. Thank you so much. We always allow people to express their, even the onliners, the only thing, as long as it's not an insult, and which of course is a genuine, we always learn from people. We would never sanction views here. People, sometimes they argue here, people online, they agree, disagree. As long as it's in a civil context, we are cool with that.
So the day you're ready to discuss the success and failures of the Ellen government, call me. And then at that time, Mr. Boya can come so he can have his opinion.
Pierre, really, I need to know.
Okay, so this is a very high board game, and we must understand people from different backgrounds. Sometimes things there's a route to a conversation here.
But Mr. So, on a serious note, Mr. So, on a serious note, I did give it a Pierre. I said yes, the conversation probably went off tangent. But the problem is, I don't want Pierre to pretend like he's giving me professional advice when he's judging me based on half a conversation. How do you give me professional advice when you're judging me unprofessionally based on half a conversation that you heard? That is sad. But to a larger point, I was trying to stress that, like Jeremy Pierre was saying, the president informed the way the work was going to happen in her office, right? She's there early. She's leaving late. She needs people to have to be abreast of issue. She meets the press, brief the press, and so her press secretary interacts with the press, and therefore that was the method, right? That was the whole process by which they communicated. It is different in George Weahtan. Let's remember that not communicating is also a communication strategy. Remember that. Not saying anything is also saying something. And so the president, if you look at the like what Pierre was saying, the press release that is attributed to the press secretary about people who, you know, they're not good parents because if they didn't go to watch their own son, they're jealous of George Weah. If the president himself is making music and calling people liar man and saying people are jealous of him and saying somebody who calls him out will now walk the street of Monrovia, how do you expect the presidential press secretary output to be any different from that? He is just taking the shape of the continuum, just like Lpr and everybody else who work in Madame Ellen press office took the shape of the continuum, which was Madame Ellen saying that I have to face the press, I have to speak to my people, so you have to be available. And when I speak to my people, I'm going to be professional. So I expect my press secretary and everybody around me to be professional. So to that is what I see as, okay, this government has their own strategy. Love it, hate it, or whatever. That is their strategy. They talk down to people. They think anybody who disagrees with them is envious of them. Therefore, when the press secretary releases a press statement, it's going to have that same thing that people are being jealous. So for me, what I look at is, you know, the press secretary takes the shape of the continuum, and that continuum is largely the person who's crafting the message, and that's the president. Donald Trump did the same thing here. And every president that comes to office does the same thing. Your press pool, your press office is going to take the shape of the work mantra of the president. And that's what the CDC government is taking on. And I'm not disappointed. I'm not surprised by the press statement that came out, because if I'll be surprised if Joe Weah come by him drop one music album calling other people jealous, I'll be surprised.
Yeah, like you rather said, Kisi, Sese rather.
You must have
sometimes you're talking.
First of all, that thing go type of my entity. I took him. I'm moving my mouth for inside. When you meet me, I thought I was going there.
No, that's a female talking to a female, so that one we got to do it.
No, the thing is that I'm not playing the female card, but I just needed to relate to her. That's all. The thing is, sometimes you're making analysis, you have to relate it. That's how she came in. I could just relate to her. That's all. And I'm not playing the card for her. I know she messed up sometime around, so that's it. She messed up.
She got her bag in front of her. How you call that bag? The one she carrying in front of her. Sister.
My mother inside. You don't put me in out of one there. So let me tell you dragging me, Jenna. I want for somebody else that can drag me too. I yelled me for that one there.
Yeah. What you saying? I know we are already but I think it's quite interesting. And I think this is where the focus should be now, because we need to have people who stand up not in a physical fight, not in a violent type, not rude, but to be honest, in as much you support people when they are doing the wrong, say it. But we have it right now, even within the same very opposition. There are people who still, they can't even stand, they can't stand up to tell their people. In as much we badge, we poke in the eyes of the government, and those who are on the roadmap to becoming the next or incoming government, and they can't even honestly to advise their leaders, they're not scaring. It almost like there will be no change. It will be the same old thing when they get there tomorrow.
Let me hold you somewhere. How many of these people who have worked close proximity with presidents of Liberia, past and present, any of them ever resign on disagreement with the president? How many person you think in Liberia? That was
I think I saw somebody even in a weird government. There was a guy that resigned.
Good morning.
Hold on now.
Yeah.
We are talking about in the
Austin Tamba, good morning from the borough of Cruton. Thank you so much for joining us.
The office of the president, press secretary.
I need to have a conversation. All these people, conversation surrounding his sons. They say he was dismissed. He said he resigned. And, we don't know. We need to.
But the man letter clear the state. The time he resigned, and the time George Weah fired, the letter clear the state. He resigned before.
The man talking about Tiawan Gonglo.
I said Tiawan. Who man you talking about?
I'm talking about Alex.
Go back to legend. Pa Josh. Alex sent you that letter?
Oh man, Alex put out a letter from Alex.
No, we're talking about
Tiawan resignation is still in question because some people he say he resigned, he said no, they were fired. So maybe
impression.
The former president on the air, he would be one of the good person. I don't know whether he was around that time.
Wait, Mr. Josh, you don't do the what is that they say thing? Who the day that saying that they want to go fire? Name one.
Okay, I will let me do my research.
That is my problem right there. Look, when opposition people start to run,
we are
aware of how people start communication. Sometimes you start with a they say, you throw it out there, and you hope it takes place. Hold on. Ellen Johnson's government was a serious government that kept records. There is no way the one would have been running around all this time saying that he resigned, and one of Ellen children ain't come by here and say you were fired.
That's why I said the young man that left on here, because he stated that he was the one that gave all the releases out to the press. He would be the first person.
But why we acting like any government that was Susu Club? If we don't have to call Jeremy Pia, we have archive. We got National Archive for state records. We just gotta go look at it. We ain't gotta call Jeremy Pia to do $2 It's not Susu Club for running.
So you're saying, George, we are running Susu Club.
No, he said not Susu Club. We're running. There's a place that we can. And because the device in the politics. The device in the politics, the very opposition tried to reconstruct their own people, other people, opponent. In fact, people within the system. We always see that happening. But the real story will comes out when the name be. But I think
the same thing that Obe did to their candidate that what want to do to all your own will not let you tell who will not sit down and let it happen. We'll push it right back in the beginning.
Another Obe tell who to defend someone's character, I would not be part of Obe. Because Obe not today. The labor is not here.
I thought Mr. Zion to just talk on this issue where you talk about people defending, their government or whoever they supported. And we see that happening. For me, especially for the we-led, government, I see these people that really defending him. It's not something strange. For me, I see them like they're having this what they call it, disenfranchised greed. They know exactly what's going on with them. They are grieving within. But then they are afraid to put that grief out that this is the person that is supported and the person have let them down. So this is where they found themselves.
But to be honest, even though the CDC is the elephant in the room now, the indefensible is taking place both sides. Opposition people defend their people for no reason that they have to defend their people. And that's the same thing, which is also scary that when they get there.
Exactly. I think you asked me while I was quiet for some time. I look at the political atmosphere, it was getting so toxic. And then people even started getting the wrong way. Because for me, I like to, when I want to play my politics, I want to encourage you to win you over. That's my main.
So hopefully you will be visiting earlier. Let's ask you in this public manner. Have you have a political pick? Have you made a political pick?
Yes, of course. I'm not hiding it. I always said it. From the onset, I was actually advocating for the ticket of Boyka and Kumin. But then when they broke away, so when they broke away, I thought I still maintained my decision as I took Boyka as the presidency level. I still maintain him as my candidate for the presidency. And I still stand by that,
You still
stand by that.
Oh, okay. I think
hopefully you got one United Party person now that we can actually talk to that will hold
for me, I'm not the United Party. I choose my candidates. Not so. Okay, let me get this clear. Because I heard some people started saying, oh, Koto, you supporting Boyka because Boyka is from Lofa. And in fact, some of you seeking job, that's how you're supporting candidate. But again, the question I pose to them, so your candidate you supporting, are you supporting them because you want a job? I supported Ellen. I was in Liberia all through her first term. I never worked with government. I never worked for Ellen. So I do my own business. Why not? I will be in America and get a career that I'm working here that I can't even do the job for it because it's too much for me. Then that's the time I'm going to campaign for a boycott to go and run behind him for a job. It's not me. Of course, anytime we all are that's our country.
So why are you
If
supporting?
I'm
So
called
why are
to
you
do a
supporting
job,
Boycott?
sorry.
Why are you supporting Boycott?
Mr.
Okay,
George.
now let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Hold on.
Say don't run away. Say don't run away. Say don't run away.
I'm not running away.
No, I said, say. I haven't told them, oh, madam, I said, say.
This is what we do, right?
Got my best advice, you can't enjoy it when I'm looking.
No, I don't believe in it.
We're not gonna make the conversation here tonight. We're not gonna make the conversation.
You brought it up. You brought this conversation up tonight.
I just want to set our openness to my people. And I always all of them want to
put out a fire, then you want to move from behind. You brought
this thing up. Nothing before my Nika can't
the reason thing is, I know what I'm saying. We have gone over our time. Beyond that, now you get a pick. I think you and Liberal will get along because he said he's not a Unity Party partisan, but he does support the candidacy of Ambassador Boyka. But Amos George, Dolake is not here today. Amos George, ANC supporter. Sese and Dr. Toto, they are Tier 1 supporters. So it's like, I think it's 2-2 now. We're still waiting for CDC people to come and defend their position. And I'll call and take my fingers.
No, we want PLP, Ministry of Labor, and CDC to join together and do one for
So Mr. Josh wanted to know why I chose my candidate.
MOL, they how to call it, people moving for liberation. What a lady that running that we interview on Sunday, that Sunday.
Miss Cooper?
Yeah, her party. And she had a MOL and a Ministry of Labor.
So now I'm going to why I chose Ambassador Boyka.
Okay. Miss
Josh wanted me to know. And if it comes to because I'm from Lofart, I'm supporting Boyka, that's not the case.
No, I didn't say so.
Yeah, I just want to clear that down. I want to clear that down.
Hold on, I told you.
We had this lady Bien. Gladys Bien was running during the time of Madame Ellie Josie Salif.
Yeah, but you know Gladys Bien or not she was Kennedy now. You know that one.
Where she was in the league. She was in the
come on,
ladies and gentlemen,
she was a Kennedy. I mean, that was just something that I could say, okay, because she's from Lofa, I could support her. We even met in a hotel. She was there. She met me. Oh, this is our thing. You got to support me. And I told her, I don't want to lie to you. I don't believe in you. I don't trust you. And before I select my candidate, I must have analyzed that candidate well and be able to filter them and trust them with the job. So there where I was. I did not know her well.
If she had money, though, she could be a serious contender, though, because she was a trailblazer in Lofa County, the late Gladys Bien. But that's a whole different thing. I went from Lofa County with you, but I'm not supporting my uncle.
Exactly. See, so that's what it is. And let me tell you now. Let me tell you now. Let me speak down low.
Listen, Blue.
Seriously? I think you on your own now. The way I see it.
You on your own.
Since coming, we going back to Lofa, you on your own.
So which part of Lofa? I can't tell what Lofa.
That number I'm supposed to hear speaks a loud volume. No, I
can't ABC the Bon County.
You see how Sese broad
don't mind but George Toto know me very well. He know when I hold my place.
He knows you very well. The one
we need together in Yula politics.
Okay, well, guys, all right. We are already over the time here. It was. I think it's better that we discuss this kind of half day. I'm talking to a big guy, and they are agreeing. Hopefully, if it is all serious, I will let you guys know. hopefully someone who's from part of, whether they are part of the delegation or they just managed to bracket there, they have agreed. We're still having a conversation to appear. So maybe we'll get a much deeper insight of the Qatar trip. I don't know. There's a big win today. I don't know what's going to be the outcome. Whether our president will be going home or he's still going to be there.
There's another letter coming.
That's why he calculated the time. So by the 18th, when the World Cup be the 18th or the 19th, 29th. So
the 18th.
The 18th. So that's why he put it that he will be in Morocco by the 18th. So since US are now going for the quarterfinal, the knockout round, that's why he want to see it. So
no,
now
if he stays to the World Cup and he still got to come meet he's still coming to meet Joe Biden, right?
No, he will stay there. He's not going back home.
That's on the 15th. He's supposed to be in Biden on the 15th. So he's still within his time.
He will decide if his son stay playing. If I say come and see Joe Biden, I'm gonna go see his son playing. Not coming to come see Joe Biden.
No, he will go see Biden.
I think you're going
to be Joe Biden. That is soccer.
Guys, thank you so much. Let's leave it here.
Nice meeting you.
And that's why he
So, Koto, thank you so much. Hopefully, you join your guys here. Once you have the time, we will always. I mean, we do. Everybody here. You know, we always have a civil conversation here for the most part. We agree, disagree, but it's done in a civil context where we allow people to express their view, opinion, as long as it's not offensive. That's what a society requires. I mean, we're having a roundtable conversation, which is good. Thank you so much. And
nice seeing you.
Enjoy the hot pepper from
thank you guys. It was nice being with you guys.
Yeah, enjoy the hot pepper in New Jersey with a cold.
Oh yes, I made some pepper soup.
Oh yeah. Okay then. All right, Pa George. Got to thank you so much. Okay, guys, that's how we're going to bring the curtain down here. Sunday, join me with the Liberian War today will be aired on Sky FM. Senator Sir Joseph of Mosorado County will be my guest, holding everything constant. To our viewers, listeners, far and near, those of you in Liberia, Commander, thank you so much, James Doe, Panorama, Samonville, I love that name, and our own sis, Dorothy, Totit, Lady T from the Pepper City. Thank you so much joining us. Nathan Blade is one of our prominent followers here as well. And Mr. Austin Tamai, good morning, LPR, Washington, from SA026, the borough of Cruton. Thank you so much. This is how the people, our people in Liberia, Liberians everywhere, they want to know what is going on in their country. And so when we come to this conversation, it is important that we keep it honest, be respectful in the process, and allow people to speak their mind. Because if you allow hidden things, then we are not finding a solution. The more people speak about their mind, things that they feel that is just in their chest and they try to get it out, the better will be, because then we know exactly the burning issues and we will be able to find solution. But when we begin to shove things down the throat of people, when they can't swallow it, they're gonna spell it out. And it's dangerous when there's an outburst. It's better to have a conversation and find a solution to this problem. I want to thank you so much for your time, and to our guests, Gerald Lpr, the former presidential press secretary, were able to get an insight, much deeper insight, the inner work out within the presidency. And that is very, very much important. And that's how we must also, those who are seeking towards these offices, we must hold them accountable. Yes, we all saying, yeah, we are. But they also have to show that resilience, that strength, that ability to lead their decision-making process. We don't want to wait until they get there and begin to give excuses. So we got to hold them accountable. They want the job. They have to show how they're going to have it done differently than what we have now. If what we have now, if it needs to be replaced, they have to show that resilience, the courage, the temperament, and the way to get it done. Until then, folks, have a pleasant evening. Thank you so much for sharing your evening to your morning hour with me. Bye-bye.
Lord, blessing and forgiveness. You solve my problem, Lord, you took me from the wilderness. Now only you can feel my struggle when I'm really stressed. So my papa bless me, then my enemy they get invest. No matter what the problem is, Father, let it go. Your delay is not your denial, everybody know. Just keep on trusting in Jehovah, he will give you more. He took me from the grass, he can take you from the rocky road. Yeah.
A limited audience, limited to people who have data and have access to the internet. Right now, we're on radio, so we've expanded the pool of listeners, and because we in LPR are in the business of educating our people, whether it's political education or academic education or health education. Now we have access to a vast majority of the Liberian population that we can now interact with. And as far as the ambassador goes, I'm excited to hear what he has to say. I hope, and I know the brother he's very smart. So I hope he brings some substance today, like he always does, and not just give us bare bones. But I know Louis Bryan. I know he's very articulated.
I just want to thank you.